So let's take a second and let's put all of what we've learned in terms of these 7 principles together in an image. Okay, take a second, look at this image, and based on all the principles that we've talked about so far, what's coming across, and how does that relate to the meaning that they're trying to portray in this image? Okay, so let me tell you what I'm seeing in this image. So first, from the standpoint of contrast, we've got a lot of contrast, and that's one of the big things that's going on in here. First of all, we've got a lot of form, just density, a lot of stuff going on in the bottom left corner that really contrasts with the openness and the space in the upper right-hand corner of the image. We have contrast between the what I'm going to call the title, which is the urban playground. And again, as I said in the design elements, the title does not always have to be in the top left corner in the center top corner aspect of an image. It can be wherever we want. We just need to use visual elements and principles to say, okay, this is most important. So we've got color contrast with the title, and because it's a little bit of a darker yellow than the rest of the yellow in the image. We've got an orientation contrast because it's slightly tilted. We got a position contrast. So we've moved the title all the way down at the bottom in that big mess of stuff away from the main content in the upper right-hand corner. We got a size contrast as well. We not only have a size contrast between the title and the sort of the body content, the description content, but we also have a size contrast with elements at the bottom appearing larger and getting smaller as they move up. We have a couple things in alignment here, not a whole lot, but we do have some alignment in the text at the top. So we've got sort of bigger bodies of text. We need to make sure that they're aligned in a particular way. The alignment here is also saying, to some extent, how things are related. So we can assume that all of the text up at the top is somewhat related. There's some sort of relationship there, even though we can't really read the text, not necessarily. We could say, okay, there's some sort of relationship between these two bodies of text. There's also a line at the base over which all of the objects in this image are sort of overlapping, they're spilling over into. In terms of repetition, we have a lot of simple shapes that get repeated. That dotted line also gets repeated. The pentagon at the bottom gets repeated a few times. We've got repeated clouds. Even though there's some variation in the clouds that keeps it interesting, we can still see some relationship between them. In terms of proximity, so the last of our CAR principles, we have separation of the title from the text. This really separates the content from the title of the page. And also there's some separation between, there's also some, not separation, excuse me, there's some relationship between the urban playground and the forms. And that has a big thing to do with the meaning of this image. We can talk about the flow of this image. The dominant flow would be from the title to the copy text. That's kind of the direction that the hand's pointing in. And sometimes they use those elements to reinforce that. I think it's somewhat clear here, although because there's so much clutter, it does help to essentially to read this poster a little bit better. In terms of balance, we've got that bottom left corner, which is very heavy. The bottom in general is very heavy. It's got a lot of elements. It's quite a bottom imbalance to the rest of the image. And lastly, in terms of hierarchy, what they're using, again, they're not using a lot here, but they're using some size differences and really sort of the directionality of moving from the bottom to the top. And what all of this coming together tries to do is it's trying to give this idea of a playful, somewhat reminiscent of childhood with the different forms and sort of the cartoon nature of everything. But in particular, it's somewhat chaotic. It's not very well organized, but it is sort of this gathering and things are going to happen and it should be exciting. And that's really what this is going for. Okay, here's the second image. Now take a look at this, pause the video, again, identify the different principles that we talked about, how they're coming into play, and try to understand a little bit in terms of the meaning of what they're trying to do here. Okay, let me tell you what I'm seeing in this image. So again, this is a magazine layout. Get some context for it. So I'm seeing some contrast between the kinds of imagery being used. Um, at the bottom, we've got images, and at the top, it's sort of just prose and text. I see a difference and a contrast. Also, we could say across the pages, there's a contrast between the images used. We've got a color contrast. We've got a density contrast. On the left side, we have one single image to the three images on the right, and we've got one single circle to the three circles on the right. We've got size contrast, not only with the circles, but then also with um, the headline to the body text. We've got a positioning or a spacing contrast between the pages. On the left-hand side, the text is very uniform, very paragraph-like, and it's got essentially what we would set. You have two columns of text there, and on the other side, it's really more blocks of text that they've just sort of inserted. From the standpoint of alignment, we have alignment from the header down to the body text, and we really have that on both sides. But we have we also have alignment of the images. They're all in one single row across the page. That's a very well planned out alignment and layout of the images here. In terms of repetition, we could say there's some repetition in terms of the way they're sort of gridding off those three images. They're very uniform in the way that they're doing it. We've got repetitions in the circles that we're having. We do have some repetition in terms of the colors being used. We've got sort of that peach circle, and then the headline above that peach circle, not the headline, but sort of the sub-headline underneath it, are the same color, as well as some bolded words in that the left-hand side of the page. And then we have some matching with the blue and some of the text there as well. In terms of proximity, we have proximity between the circles and the text. We have some proximity between at least the image on the left-hand side and the text on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, there's space between it. We could say it's a little bit less related because there's a little bit of a gap. We have the text on the right-hand page and the heading. The text on the left-hand page and the heading. They're very close. We can say, okay, this heading belongs to this text. We can still say that on the right-hand side, that's probably more due to the alignment because the proximity here is a little bit odd. We would expect not to have that text centered in the middle of the space that's there, but related up closer to the headline. That would show that they're somewhat related. And we have the page number at the bottom. And in this case, it's somewhat separated from the rest of all the elements on the page because it's to some extent somewhat of an afterthought. It's okay, well, you want to know what page you're on? Well, here it is off to the bottom right-hand corner. In terms of flow, it's not super clear, although in general it sort of follows any kind of a body of text where we start in the top left-hand corner and move our way down column 1 and then column 2. That's more cultural. That's not so much visual. There's also somewhat in relationship to how the circles are placed and how the images are placed. It moves you from left to right, sort of reinforcing that idea. In terms of balance, we could say that it's a very bottom-heavy image, that those images are dominating a lot of the images more so than the text is. And we also have a right-to-left dominance because of just the density and the amount of color in the right-hand page to the left-hand page. And lastly, the hierarchy comes out a lot more strongly. We have size as being one of those things. As I talked about, the headline's a little bit bigger. We've got color somewhat. It's definitely pulling out important words and important phrases to look at, as well as sort of helping to emphasize things, and the imagery as well. And I think the key thing in terms of what is being meant here is that it's really balancing fun and dancy, but also natural. They're talking about what they like. and it really gives this youthful feel to it. The circles help reinforce that as well. It's almost kind of bubbly or dancey or fun or youthful or something like that. Okay, so that's it for these video lectures. I hope that these different ideas are starting to come together, not just in this video clip, but and also the previous two. These ideas we're going to be touching upon throughout the semester. They're going to be important as you start to create your own visual designs with the tools that we're going to be working with. We will continue this discussion in class. Again, sort of more generally throughout the semester, but in particular, next week when I'm back, we'll talk about this stuff more. I want to remind you one last time not to forget to post to Sakai in the forums. There's going to be a prompt question that I want you to reply to that's going to require to have done the readings, to have seen some of these videos and understand these topics. And we'll have a little bit of a discussion about that online. What I will say is, first of all, if you're unsure about how to get to the forums, double check the very end of the intro video. It describes that again, where you can find them in your Sakai section. And then lastly, I just want to remind you from the perspective of the forums, just to make sure that you've done whatever participation you're going to do before the beginning of class when we meet for the first time. And that's it. I can't wait to meet you guys. Hope everything is going well.